Hey, everybody, welcome. Perfect. Welcome to the emergency release.
You help Cassie?
Cassie?
Yeah.
Okay. Cassie?
Yeah.
Super. Great. Welcome, everybody. Do you want to give it another minute or two for folks to hop in, or should we just get going?
There we go.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to ERP2 or Emergency Relief for Crop Growers webinar. This is the third, I believe, webinar that we've done on this topic, and there will be one more May 24th, and we'll be sharing some additional information about that at the end. So my name is Sarah Wuta. I am working with Renewing the Countryside and Farm Services Agency on emergency relief. And then we also have Ryan Pesch here. Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ryan Pesch. I'm an ag business management educator with the University of Minnesota Extension. Commercial vegetable operator myself, so gives me a little bit of context for some of this kind of stuff.
Thanks. And Sarah George? Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Sarah George. I'm with Renewing the Countryside and helping not only with the emergency relief, but also with our Go Farm Connect project here in both Minnesota and Wisconsin. Happy to have you all here today. Thank you. And then we also have some folks from Farm Services Agency here. I saw a lot of FSA folks on. And John Palmer from FSA in Wisconsin is, can't see who else is here, but he is available to help with any clarification or questions that are that we are unable to answer. So feel free to jump in with questions and interrupt us or put them in the chat throughout our webinar today. And so we're just going to get going. Ryan, do you want to move to the next slide? So ERP2 is, I mean, I'm not just going to read this, but it's it's a revenue-based emergency relief program for disaster years 2020 or 2021, specifically for crop growers. So this does exclude any livestock or animal products. But when we are thinking about crop growers, we're thinking about fruits, vegetables, field crops, trees, anything like that, for folks who had a loss due to a qualifying disaster in years 2020 or 2021. And this goes a little bit into it. So who is eligible? So crop producers who had those disaster events. And then the qualifying disasters are wildfires, hurricanes, floods, derechos, excessive heat, winter storms, freeze, smoke exposure, excessive moisture, qualifying drought, and related conditions. For the qualifying drought, there are counties in Minnesota and Wisconsin that were designated as having a qualifying drought in both 2020 and 2021. And we will get the link to that information into the chat. But most of them are in 2021 for that qualifying drought. All right. Any questions on what types of crops qualify or what is a natural disaster? What type of weather-related disaster qualifies? Anybody?
Hey, Sarah, this is John from FSA.
Yeah.
I do know it, and you brought up qualifying drought. And so I thought, and we can put the link in there too, but for 2021 in Wisconsin, qualifying drought was in the southeastern corner of the state. Racine, Kenosha, Milwaukee, Walworth, and Rock counties were the 5 counties that hit the threshold for a qualifying drought in 2021.
Great, thank you, John. And in Minnesota, it was almost every county, if I remember correctly. It was most of the state. And as soon as Ryan starts presenting, I will pull that list and throw it in there. All right, I think we can move on. So this is, there's a lot of information out there about ERP2, and we wanted to kind of just help simplify whether or not you qualify for ERP2. So looking at this decision tree, you can kind of follow who you are through it. Did you farm crops in 2020 or 2021? Yes. Moving along. Did you experience one of these disasters that we discussed? If yes, then did you lose projected revenue due to that? And here's where ERP2 is different than a lot of the other FSA programs available, is that it is, if 2020 or 2021 was your first year farming, you can still apply. So you don't need to have filed that Schedule F for the previous years. What you do need is a way to show what your projected revenue was for those years. And that can be done through, crop planning, through markets that you had signed up for. Maybe you had sold CSA memberships, contracts with restaurants, or other things like that. And we do have folks on the team, including Ryan, to help you work through that to see if you have the records needed to show what your projected revenue was. Any questions about that? I talk fast, so feel free to slow me down and ask questions. Okay. The other option, if 2020 or 2021 wasn't your first year farming, but you did have that projected revenue or loss due to natural disaster, if you had filed a Schedule F in 2018 or 2019, those would, the numbers you use to file your Schedule F or what you would use to determine what your benchmark revenue was for this. And Ryan will go more into that. But if you did file a Schedule F in 2018 or 2019 and did have losses, the information in your Schedule F is going to help you fill out the application for this. And so if that's the case, then you can contact your local FSA office or us to help you apply. And if you have planning materials and records for 2020 or 2021, and those were your first year's farming, or you didn't file a Schedule F in 2018 or 2019, but have records, we can help you put that together to see if applying for ERP2 is right for you. Gonna stop there and open it up for questions. No? Okay, let's move along. All right, now it's Ryan's turn.
Okay, so being that this whole webinar is about, does ERP2 make sense for you? Is it right for you? One of the primary questions that we've been receiving is, okay, I feel like I was in one of these disasters. I had lower revenue than I expected. How do we get a sense of like, does it make sense? Am I going to get a payout on this ERP2 or not? And I just put in here just a little information about how you would determine that to see if this would make sense for you. So again, you heard Sarah talk about a benchmark year of 18 or 19, and then a disaster year of 20 or 21. So there may be one reason or another you're going to choose 18 or 19 as your benchmark year. It's what's most typical for your farm operation. There are some issues is if you increase capacity or decrease capacity, but let's just say, hey, I got a pretty typical year here in 18 or 19, and that's my benchmark year. And I'm trying to compare it to my disaster year. And so FSA uses this factor of 0.7 of your benchmark and comparing that to your disaster year. That's the main part of the formula to take a look at. And I just put this down here as an example, and you can certainly apply that same kind of thinking to your own operation to kind of think through how this would, if it fits or doesn't fit, right? So if you, as an example, 60,000 as your benchmark year, this is a typical year. We're multiplying it by that factor, 0.7%. That's 42,000. Okay. If your disaster year was lower than that, say our disaster year is 38,000, goodness, let's fill that out. Let's fill out that application. We need to apply to ERP2 because we're probably eligible for a payment. It's kind of that simple. That disaster year was less than that benchmark year with that factor. You know, that's just the simple math here. There is an initial $2,000 payment. There may be some payment afterwards, depending on all these other factors that FSA deals with in terms of other factor payments after the point. Still, I know our friends at FSA, and we've always said with the group working with Go Farm Connect, it's like, even if you're not eligible, there may be a reason for you to file with FSA just to get started with FSA, right? So if our disaster year was 45,000, hey, it's less than, yeah, I lost $15,000 from what I typically would do here. I'm still putting that as a maybe. Maybe you should still go into your FSA, at least get started with FSA, and get some those initial forms on file so that you are recognized, and when a similar kind of program does present itself, you're in a much better place. You're much more FSA ready, if you will. But that's kind of how the initial kind of like, you know, is this going to make sense for me in terms of dollar amounts, how the math works out like, and we're comparing that disaster year to the benchmark here. Second part, I mean, as I think Sarah talked about, or alluded to, that it's a little different from typical FSA payments. We're not talking about yield, and we're talking about revenue for your farm, and so this really relates to a lot of our tax schedules and what we identified as our revenue on our farms, both in that disaster year as well as the benchmark year. And because of this, it's been clear. It's like FSA says, hey, don't show up in the office here with a bunch of Schedule Fs. We really need you to become prepared. And there's a worksheet that helps you kind of sort out what is that allowable revenue in the disaster year and the allowable revenue in the benchmark year. So it's revenue based, and it's based on your farm financial records. So again, however you're filing your taxes and identifying what your revenue was for those corresponding years, that's what we need to look at. And some people are at different time schedules. Some people are Schedule S people. A lot are Schedule F people. The vast majority of folks that are eligible for this program are probably scheduling a Schedule F, right? And so that's what I got here, right? We've seen this before. Our CPA makes us fill us out, or they help us get through this form. And but there are just a few adjustments and details to it in terms of what's allowable and not allowable. And I think that's what's important here, that you kind of need to do a little bit of homework before you step in that FSA office to apply for ERP2. The big part is it's crop only. So if you're a mixed operation that has some livestock sales and some crop sales, and they're all mixed together, we need to split those things apart. And then there's also some details related to what's allowable revenue and what's not allowable revenue. And I'm just going to go through some of that. There's this worksheet here, this 521A. I know Sarah's going to put in kind of the main page at FSA about ERP2. And honestly, I mean, I looked at this, and it's my role here to help you or anybody kind of work through this revenue stuff in order that you're prepared to apply for ERP2. So I've looked at this a number of times, and really it's a very detailed worksheet to saying, okay, these are things that are eligible, what they call allowable revenue, and what's not, right? And it just line by line, line by line, and a lot of it will correspond to the lines on a Schedule F, just to make it easy for those folks that have filed a Schedule F. So again, these detailed instructions, again, it helps us to kind of separate out livestock from crops. It Schedule F value added, which is typically what we call de minimis revenue. That is just a small amount of your revenue in Schedule F is allowable. It's in here. Co-op distributions, you'll see, are allowable, but only those related to sales, right? So you might have a co-op distribution that's not related, that's related to inputs, or it's related to even to some kind of personal purchases of gas or something at your local co-op, and it's mixed in there with your dividend filing. We need to take those things out, so we're only looking at those crop sales. Certainly, it also lists out all the government payments, and that would be also allowable revenue that you would include. And then lastly is this crop insurance proceeds minus the premiums and fees. So again, there's some real details here in terms of how do we get to allowable revenue. A little example that I stole from our friends at Rural Tax Education, part of the National Extension Tax Education Committee. And they put together this example here just to show what this ends up looking like here. Again, you see here on the left, just to orient you a little bit, these are the lines from our Schedule F. Lines 1A, 1B, 1C. Again, if you're doing these, you might be to have done these many years, so it might seem very familiar to you. And it shows over here on the right here. So 1A, of course, is this. Oftentimes it's used for a lot of livestock, right? We're purchasing some kind of young stock, we're feeding it out, and then we're selling it, right? We're taking out the basis for those things. In this case, we're taking out all livestock stuff at all, but there might be some crop things that would be on that 1A, and we're subtracting out that basis that we're putting down over here in our item 9, right? And again, line 2, this is where we're putting our typical sales. I had sales at a farmer's market. I had sales with the restaurant. I had sales at the elevator, right? And broken out both by livestock from our records versus crops. And we're, again, here to help you kind of separate those things out so we get an accurate accounting of what are allowable revenue. Again, co-op distributions, subtracting out any kind of personal things that might be not included. Agricultural payments, less any kind of crop market gain, CCC loans, things like this. Again, they're just pretty detailed instructions about what's allowable and not allowable. And basically what we do is we do the same process both for that benchmark year and the disaster year. And then that can get filed in if there's a difference there, and a big enough difference between that benchmark year and disaster year. Okay, makes sense. Those are the numbers that we're going to use when we're filing at FSA. There is on this site, the main site, it's called the ERP2 phase tool. If you're an Excel person, you can plug in your own numbers. Certainly work with your own CPA or tax preparer to do that. But also Ryan and Eric are available to help you do that. I see we have a hand raised. Kafa?
Yeah, it's Kifa.
Kifa. Sorry, Kifa.
That's okay. Thank you. So sorry I joined late. There was confusion. Are you saying we should separate, like I would say, like I have a small CSA and then my main crop is livestock. Mm-hmm. Like I have sheep, goats, very small scale of beef. So yep. Are you saying each thing we should treat it as its own unit?
Yep. What I'm saying is for this ERP2 thing, it only applies to crops. All the livestock stuff doesn't apply at all.
Okay.
And so
if you were a poultry farmer in 2020, you didn't do turkey because of the, pandemic, and you lost that income, it doesn't count.
No, not for this program. It may have counted for previous programs with things like there was a CFAP program that was related to the pandemic and pandemic losses. Am I right, wrong, FSA folks? Help me out here. I'm just zero in on this ERP2 thing.
That's okay.
Well, Ryan, I think my counterpart, Kara Klein, is on the call too, but what I'm hearing is if there's the ERP program, just like you said, Ryan, is crops only. We do have another program that's running simultaneous here to ERP phase 2, which is PARP, Pandemic Assistance Revenue Program. And so there may be an avenue for livestock under that PARP program. So it's a separate program than what we're talking about today, but that might be an option for some of those losses related to things other than crops or, like livestock.
Very good,
So-
John. That makes a lot of sense.
John, who does one reach out to find out more about that program?
I would say that the was there somebody? Oh, I would say the first point of contact would be to find your local FSA office. And I'm sure we'll put it in the chat here sometime. I can make sure it's put in the chat, but we have a website that'll help direct you to who your local county FSA office is, and then you could inquire with them.
Okay, thank you.
And I know, John, maybe you have on your fingertips there that PARP fact sheet. That might be helpful.
I just put the link to it in the chat.
Oh, very good.
So Kifa, it's a fact sheet that has ERP2 and PARP right next to each other. And I believe that PARP does cover livestock and that it is specific to pandemic relief. So, but if anybody else from FSA wants to confirm that, but yeah, you want to get in touch with your FSA office, or we can talk to you more about that.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. I need to set up a meeting anyway, so that would be a good start.
There we go.
Thanks.
Very good. I'm gonna continue on this little example, and then we'll get into the last kind of requirements related to the program for the ERP2. But again, like I was saying, I mean, it's, from my point of view, it's pretty straightforward working with some of your tax schedules and tax filings. Or if you, again, like Sarah mentioned, if it's your first year, was 20 or 21, kind of made some tough years to start. I don't know. We can work on, what estimating out what that expected revenue was, and get together other information, other numbers for you, and with you, I should say. But again, we're just doing this for our benchmark year. We're doing this with our also for our disaster year. And then we see down here at the bottom, the little arrows. Hey, in this example, this farmer had 539,000 in their benchmark year, and 367,000 in the disaster year. Okay, even at that 0.7%, there's a clear loss there. Even with that factor, it makes sense for them to file. If we look here, the form that'll be used at FSA is FSA 521. And so again, there's just a Part C and a Part D where you're putting in revenue for disaster year and revenue for a benchmark year, and that's how we file. But we need to do this pre-work essentially. That's important. And again, myself and Eric are there to help sort that out. And certainly if you do apply and accept ERP payment or ERP2 payment, one requirement related to that is what's called an insurance linkage requirement. So you agree to 2 years of some type of crop insurance. And I know we just thought we'd talk a little bit about some of those different flavors of crop insurance, and one certainly being NAP through your FSA office as well. So Sarah, you going to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, excuse me. NAP is the non-insured crop disaster assistance program that's available through the Farm Service Agency. And with NAP, any producer that you're working with that is socially disadvantaged, beginning farmers or limited resource farmers are able to receive a waiver of those fees to apply for that. However, NAP insurance is typically $325 a year per crop, up to a total of $825 a year per producer per county. So if you're in multiple counties, that could change. But I did want to say that that fee can be waived by farmers, veterans, limited resource farmers, American Indians, minorities, women, and underserved producers. And so I just wanted to share that that is a program through the FSA. And Sarah, I think you have the next one.
Thanks. And I'd like to clarify, so that insurance is not facilitated through Farm Services Agency. Any of these insurance programs, you would need to find you need to work with a crop insurance agent who will help you get a quote. And again, after the June 2nd deadline, folks from this team and Go Farm Connect will be able to help you with those pieces. And that's not something that will need to be done. The crop insurance doesn't need to be done until the next insurance year. So there's that. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of information on whole farm revenue protection. If either of you do, great. If not, Ryan knows more about insurance than I do.
Yeah, yes, and we've had a little project here, both on whole farm revenue protection and microfarm, for those that often direct market or specialty crop operators. So this is something that we're working at. But as the name describes, whole farm revenue is a revenue-based program, right? Most popular program in the U.S. through Risk Management Agency is revenue protection, oftentimes for corn and soybean operations. But a lot of folks that are have diverse operations, it gets kind of messy, right? So that's why there's this whole farm revenue protection, so that you're protecting at the revenue basis. So it's like, hey, I do 60,000 in sales a year traditionally, like our benchmark year example. You can protect the revenue at for the full 60,000 in revenue, and there's some change, whether it's market related or weather related. It's covered, if you will, right? I mean, you could break your leg and not be able to go to a farmer's market. I mean, that's right. You're protecting that way. And microfarm is an offshoot of that. It's sort of a simpler program. Whole farm revenue protection can go up, I think, to $2 million in insurance. And microfarm is really geared towards the smallest of producers. It can also cover value-added products. So if you're doing jams, jellies, things like this, that can also be covered under microfarm. But it's only for those with $250,000 in total sales or less. So it is, again, geared towards, because it's whole farm revenue, it's geared towards those that are diverse operations. You could direct market, like Kifa was talking about. I'm direct marketing some livestock and lamb, and I'm also do produce over here. Okay, well, look at this. It can get combined here under a microfarm insurance program or whole farm revenue insurance program. Microfarm is just simpler to apply for and to get in comparison to whole farm revenue. So those are some options. When we did some research here with microfarm, typically the cost has been somewhere between 1.6 and 2.2% of total sales. So if you want to get some kind of sense about what that looks like, if you take 2% of what your total sales are annually, give it some kind of sense of what the premium cost would be at the 75% coverage rate. So that's what I got, maybe more than people want to know. So it's back to you, Sarah, in terms of how to prepare and work with FSA.
Okay, thank you. Just for the insurance linkage, does anybody have any questions about that? Or does anybody from FSA want to jump in and share anything additional about linkage?
I have a question about the insurance. This is Kifa. That's something that has been confusing to me as a connector and as farmer myself. for the first time, I was always done direct sales, and first time I'm going to farmers market, and it's required to have an insurance, and my insurance says we don't cover your crop. You don't cover you on farmers market. So, and I'm polyculture, so I have livestock and vegetable. So where does one go to get those coverage?
So Kifa, that's a different type of insurance. So that's a liability insurance.
Yeah.
Whereas this is crop insurance. And I'd be happy to talk to you about liability insurance.
That'd be great.
Because I used to manage the market that you're going to be selling at. So I can work with you on that. But yeah, it's totally separate from crop insurance. This crop insurance is for crop losses. Liability insurance is kind of like, it's like business liability insurance.
Yeah. And this one, it sounds like it's designed mainly for big producers and monocropping, like soy, corn.
Well, so traditional crop insurance is more so designed for what you just described, but NAP, whole farm revenue, and micro farm are designed more for diversified farmers. So NAP, you insure single crops, for example. Like if you had an acre of strawberries that were pick your own or something, and that was a really valuable crop to you, you would insure that crop, for example. The whole farm revenue protection, as Ryan said, that's looking at the revenue of your farm as a whole. So that's where you're not having to divide out, like, I want to insure this crop, I want to insure this crop. With the whole farm revenue, you're insuring the revenue that you make as a whole on the farm. And then micro farm insurance is kind of like a simpler version of that, if just to kind of like get the basics in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, none of this is applicable to farmers markets. This is all about the ensuring the actual crop on your farm.
In other words, it would be asset protection.
Yes, it's totally separate.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would make one note here. I mean, if you ever did talk to an insurance agent and a crop insurance agent about, can I protect this? And they're like, I don't do that kind of stuff. There are not a lot of insurers, from my understanding, that do a lot of whole farm revenue protection. It's kind of complicated to them. And second, microfarm is extremely new. It's extremely new. The very, very first year, the pilot for microfarm was in 2021. That was not that long ago. 2022, there was an expansion and change to it, but it is a program of the risk management agency. And so, again, I think it's simpler. I probably will be, we hope, more readily adopted by insurers. But you could very well talk to a bunch of insurers and be like, I don't really know what you're talking about with this microfarm thing. It's a new thing for them as well. I could say, John, you unmuted. You have a point to make, please.
Well, so there's a couple things that I wanted to hit on with this slide as far as linkage. First of all, if federal crop insurance is available for a crop and linkage is required, there's a certain threshold, and it's basically a 60% coverage, so 6,100. And when we talk about, one of the questions here is about, and I think Kifa, you brought it up, maybe that, hey, federal crop insurance might not insure your strawberries or your apples, or maybe you grow lettuce or different crops like that. That is the purpose of the NAP program through FSA. I don't want to mince words. The NAP program is basically insurance, and it's for those producers who can't obtain insurance through federal crop insurance. So NAP is really there to kind of help fill in the gaps where federal crop insurance is not available. I know that we provide NAP policy to folks who are at farmers markets and different things like that. So that insurance is meant to kind of fill that gap. The other thing that, and I think I know I've talked with Sarah Squared, the two Sarahs, a little bit about, is that the agency, when we look at linkage, We are checking into how micro farm insurance fits into the linkage requirements. The way the policy reads right now is if federal crop insurance is available for, say, a crop like corn or soybeans or wheat, things like that, then coverage would be through federal crop insurance. If federal crop insurance is not available, then the next step is looking at the NAP program. And the requirement under NAP program is our lowest level. The basic coverage or a catastrophic level coverage, just like Sarah talked about, the folks that are historically underserved producers or socially disadvantaged, limited resource beginning farmer, veteran farmers, there's a complete waiver of the service fees for that NAP program. And with our lowest level, that catastrophic level coverage, there isn't even a premium. And I think that's important to point out, that if you have a crop that's not insurable through federal crop insurance and NAP is the correct avenue, there may not even be a fee associated with that coverage through the Farm Service Agency. So those are a couple of things I wanted to point out there, and I'll go back on mute and be quiet.
Thank you, John, for that clarification. Much appreciated. Okay, so in terms of how to prepare, so if we skip down to skip the first part of the 521 and 521A and go down to these next 4 bullets, those are forms that you are going to fill out with FSA, no matter what. And they're forms that then will be on file. And so the next time something comes up that you would like to apply for with FSA, you are ready, set, go, because you've gotten those 4 things done. In terms of applying specifically for ERP2, so the 521, these are the forms that Ryan was talking about filling out earlier. And so either working with Ryan or Eric to help figure out what numbers need to go in there, or using the tool, the ERP tool, and I put the link in there to the ERP2 website that has that tool on there to help you figure out where to put things and how to get your money, how to get your revenue divided up and what's allowable and what's not, so that you can fill out this form. And you don't need a Schedule F to apply, but if you have one, that's where you're going to be getting a lot of your information for these applications. And then I think that's it for these. Any questions about how to prepare? Okay. All right, next. Okay, so what if you've done this, you've talked to Ryan or Eric, or you've gone through all of your numbers, or maybe you don't have any numbers, maybe you haven't been keeping records, and maybe just ERP2 isn't right for you right now. There are a couple next steps so that you're ready next time. One is start keeping records. And if you want assistance with how to start keeping records, you can contact us at info@gofarmconnect.org, or get directly in touch with Ryan or Eric, and their emails are on the last slide, to figure out what you need to be keeping track of. For one, to have a successful business, and 2, so that you can be applying for programs like this when they come up, because they're there to help assist farmers. And the next thing to do is, if you haven't been into your local FSA office before, head on in there and say, hey, I'm a farmer in the area, and I've never been here, and I just want to get into your system. And so there are a few forms that you'll fill out so that you're in their system. And then when new programs come up, they're gonna, you'll find out about them. Get on their email list. They send out newsletters. And if you'd like help with that, with getting connected to FSA, we have a team of connectors. A lot of them are on this call right now, but you can get hooked up with a connector in your area who can help you get set up with your local FSA office. And so you can email us at info@gofarmconnect.org for that as well. All right. Any questions about any of that?
I have a question
Yes.
about the form, filling out what is called the representative revenue year.
Mhm.
Seems to be a little bit vague to me. I understand the benchmark year on revenue and the disaster year revenue. I don't know what that representative revenue year really is.
I think you only need the two. Honestly, where are you seeing the representative year?
Well, it's on page 2 of that FSA form,
Okay.
column 9 and column 20. And it's called representative revenue year. And I'm struggling to figure out exactly what that is and how it's different from benchmark or disaster year.
Hey, Brian. This is John. You okay if
John.
I chime in? Or
Please, John, you know your forms better than I do. That's please.
all right. Well, so the form that you're talking about is the FSA 521. So that's the ERP phase 2 application. And under the representative year, and the two blocks that you referred to are blocks 9 and I believe block 20.
Yes.
And so when block 9, when you look at the form and it says part C, it's 2020 disaster year. The form is developed so that if you are a producer who you might grow your crop in 2020, but if you would store that crop and hold it over to the next tax year, then you may choose a different year than the year you grew the crop. Okay. And so an example would be, say you grow your corn, you harvest it, you store it in your on-farm storage or at a warehouse, and you carry it over to the next year in March, and then you sell it. Even though it's a 2020 crop, you grew it in 2020, you waited to market that crop until 2021. And if that's the representative year of when you sold the crop, you can make the choice to choose that year instead of the year you grew it.
Okay. That's
Did I-
helpful. Thank you.
All right, I hope I didn't muddy that up, but the one thing to be aware of is if you're a producer who suffered losses in both years, 2020 and 2021, if you're looking at 2020 and you choose 2021 as your representative, revenue year, then if you apply for 2021, you would have to choose the next consecutive year, which means you would have to choose 2022. So those 2 years that you choose for your revenue years have to be consecutive.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you had a disaster in 2020, but you chose 2021 revenue, then if you had a disaster in 2021, you would be required to use 2022 revenue. So
Thanks, John. You
it's a
saved
little
me.
muddy.
That seemed clear to me. Here, I'm good. I'm smarter now.
And these
I have-
questions help everybody, so please keep asking them.
I have a question, John. I know that FSA staff is not able to help folks determine their numbers and look at their Schedule F and everything like that. But if somebody came in with all of their information and had a question like the one that just came up, is that something that agency staff could help clarify in the moment as somebody's filling something out?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. I say yes. Our staff can, explain the policy. They can look at the form and explain, the categories of what's allowable, what's not allowable, and how that representative revenue year applies. They should be able to explain those types of things. And you're absolutely right, Sarah. Our FSA employees cannot give any advice on how to put the numbers into the form. That's, the producer has to come up with those numbers on their own when they do their certification. And I'm certain that staff, our county staff is aware of where the ERP phase 2 tool is. And our staff has to, no matter what the application is, would most likely need to enter it into our online software too. So the numbers that are provided, they'd have to plug it into the software, and they could assist with that part of the application.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I would say that I would put a plug in for that ERP phase 2 tool that's on the website. It's really good. The other thing that if folks are already participating with FSA and they previously received agricultural program payments, our staff has the ability to pull reports to show the payment amounts and when they were received and that kind of stuff. If that, if a producer didn't have the records for those agricultural payments from FSA, we would be able to, prepare that report or pull it for folks.
Great. Thank you. Are there more questions? We have about 12 minutes to answer questions or anything. Nothing? You're all running off to your FSA office to apply, huh?
Sarah, I have a question, sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Earlier, John talked about the difference between the FS, what do you call the insurances?
Mm-hmm.
And the NAP, is it NAP? Yeah. I'm still a little confused about it. Like, he said something about, disadvantaged group. So is this like insurance you have to buy through the FSA or through the USDA, or exactly what is it? That's what I'm not clear yet.
John, you want to go ahead?
I will try and do my best. Sometimes I gotta back up a little bit from agency speak because we get into such technical pieces. But so to kind of reiterate what I said earlier, if federal crop insurance is available, you'd be able to insure your crop you'd reach out to a crop insurance agent. If that's not available, then FSA potentially offers the non-insured crop disaster assistance program, or NAP. NAP is our acronym. Generally speaking, there is a service fee, and Sarah George talked about that earlier. It's $325 per crop, and then there's a limit up to $825 per county, and then there's another limit. I believe it's $1,950 maximum if you're in many counties. But producers who fit into the category, considered historically underserved or underserved producers, so folks that are considered socially disadvantaged, limited resource, a beginning farmer, which is less than 10 years of farming, or a veteran farmer within the last 10 years, those folks can complete a form. It's a CCC 860 to certify to their status. And then that would allow them to have a waiver of the service fee. So the service fee would no longer apply. And
So
then
when you say service fee will not apply any longer, who's going to pay the service fee? Is there a grant? Is there a cost share? I'm confused.
It's
Nope, it's just waived.
So you're not required to have crop insurance.
You're not required to pay the service fee to get your NAP coverage on your crop.
I see. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep.
And who, okay, another question. Who are these crop insurance agencies? Like, how do we get their names and stuff so we can direct people to them?
So there are crop insurance agents throughout the country. And I will throw in for some reason the USDA website doesn't want to work for me this week when I need it really badly. There are crop insurance agents listed. I will send this out if I can't find it right now, but I will send this out because I can't find it right now. I will send this out to everybody on this call afterwards, but it's a list of crop insurance agents. And we will, people will also be continuing to work with folks on crop insurance after the ERP2 deadline, after that June 2nd deadline.
But basically, there's a finder for crop insurance agents through the USDA website.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part of USDA called the Risk Management Agency. They're like the federal crop insurance people. They oversee all crop insurance in the U.S. because it's tied into USDA. And so, and sometimes it's a little clunky. I mean, some of the more common, like Compeer does. If you know some brands, like there's like Compeer, and there's Minnesota Farmers Union Insurance, are some common insurer providers, but there's also sort of smaller insurers that insure in a smaller area as well. And some of them might just be like just talking to one of them to say, you do crop insurance? No, but this person in our agency does crop insurance. And it can be as simple as that. It's like finding somebody for insurance with your car. There's so many in your area that are doing it. Once you're familiar with them, those are the people. And if they don't do necessarily one kind of crop insurance or another, don't specialize in it, a lot of times if they're a bigger agency, they can find somebody that does, sort of thing.
And it looks like Kara just, thank you, Kara, for dropping that link in there to the agent locator. And I think what you'd want to ask Kifa is, so NAP is through FSA, so you would go to your local FSA office. Whole farm revenue and micro farm, which are the ones that, I mean, based on what I know about your system in particular, those are the ones that it would either be NAP, whole farm, or micro farm for you.
Yeah.
Whole farm and micro farm are going to be through a crop insurance agent. NAP is going to be through Farm Services Agency. Is that correct, everybody?
Say that again, Sarah.
So NAP, the one that Sarah George talked about earlier and that John was just mentioning, the non-insured
crop disaster assistance program. Non-insured crop disaster assistance program. So it's NAPS.
Which is not the correct acronym for NAP. Or NAP. So that's why it's confusing. But yeah, so NAP,
NAP.
That is through Farm Services Agency. And that's going to be individual crops that you would be insuring. Whole farm revenue and micro farm insurance are a little bit more for a diversified farm. So that if you've got a bunch of things going on, those are programs that are set up to better be able to insure a diversified operation. And those are through a crop insurance agent.
Actually, NAP could do your whole farm, but you would have to go John, I want to make sure I do this right, but you would select crop by crop and you're going to pay for each crop that you're insuring up to that $825, but you have to actually itemize each crop, correct, John?
Yes, it's it's crop by crop.
Mhm.
So the 350 is per crop, but the cap is 850, correct?
325 per crop with a cap of 825 per
Yeah.
county.
What do you mean per county? Like if I'm only in Chisago farming,
Yep.
Mhm.
my farm could not be charged more than 8 something.
825. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm learning this. I'm new to this whole deal, so please bear with me.
Glad
No,
you're
great.
asking the questions.
Yeah,
It
great
helps
question.
other people that don't ask those. So it's a great thing you're asking them, Kifa.
Thank you.
And I think we just have a few minutes left. Does anybody have any other questions or clarifications or anything?
I just
Right,
want to put a shout out to the link in the chat. The next webinar that we're going to be doing is going to be similar to this, but it's going to be from stories that a farmer has shared of their experience while applying for the ERP2, and you can ask questions about what they had to come up with. So there's a link in the chat, and would love, I'm going to actually drop it in again, real life stories from disaster relief applicants that have tried this. So thank you all for attending today, and I'll pass it back over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing about that that webinar. That is the last webinar in this series. Applications are due June 2nd. Can you, Ryan, can you go back to that slide one before this one? Because I'd just like to make a reminder that the next steps are, so even if you're not going to apply for ERP2, or if you are, keep records because those are going to really help you with any type of insurance, any type of farm services agency programs, getting loans from any bank, any number of things. And we can help you getting started with that. We can also help you get to know your local FSA office and help you get started there. So, and we hope to see you and all of your friends on May 24th at 7 p.m. to hear from Noreen Thomas about her experience in applying for ERP2 and in helping other farmers apply as well. And Ryan will be on that call as well to help with records information. So thank you all.
So question, it says here that to get set up with record keeping assistant, what is that?
If you want assistance in